Have you ever watched a satellite takeoff? I'm sure you would have done on a TV. Now what happens to the satellite that is taking off? There is ignition, there is a lot of smoke, and then the rocket launches. It's going soup, 9.8 kilometers per second. It is trying to gain escape velocity and exit the Earth's atmosphere. Now in this stage, during every stage of this launch, certain things is left behind or separated. The boosters, the thrusters, the cylinders, payload, as we call, is all separated as the launch begins. And at one stage, the cabin where the satellite is, only that portion is separated from everything else in the rocket, and it moves on to the orbit. So in the process of the launch, everything else is gone. It's just the satellite that goes to the orbit. And finally, even that chamber where satellite is there is gone. It's just the satellite that goes to the orbit and it starts revolving. That's a little bit of science. Now imagine, what if the entire rocket with all the payload has to go to the orbit to leave the satellite there? 10 out of 10 times you know that mission will be failed. Now think of your personal or professional life like a satellite, and you want to launch it and put it in a higher orbit, let's say a geostationary orbit where it really belongs to. Okay? As we evolve and emerge and grow, the satellite of our personal and professional growth, it might be relationships, it might be career, it can be health, it can be money, it can be financial growth, anything of that sort. That satellite needs to go up and belong to the orbit where it belongs to. So this launch process also requires a rocket that is taking it off. At the same time, it also requires some bit of shedding the payload, as in the launch process. That means if I don't shed something on the way, if I don't leave behind something on the way, if I don't separate things on the way, my satellite will not almost every time get into the orbit. Mission failed. Now, what it takes to make this mission successful every time is that, are you ready to leave behind, separate, shed the payload? And the payload that I am talking about is, can we leave behind our egos that does not support the launch of the satellite? Can we leave behind past failures that is no more empowering us? If you can learn from the failures, fair enough. If you can't, I think you need to leave behind. Can we leave behind relationships and people who are painful and meaningless? Can we leave behind past glories that doesn't matter anymore? Few of us like to bask on our past glory, and it really is not serving the future, because you know, past is no reference to future. It's also necessary for your personal and professional satellite to launch and get into the orbit to leave behind identities that does not serve you, that does not help in the launch process. Habits that does not empower you or help you launch the satellite. Think of this. You have the habit of getting up, let's say 7:30 a.m. in the morning, all the life. And your goal, the satellite that you want to put into the orbit, is to have a very fit body, which may require you to wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning. Unless you shed, unless you leave behind, unless you separate the habit of waking up at 7:30 a.m. in the morning, you will not launch the fitness goal of the satellite to reach its orbit. It's also important to leave behind, separate thoughts, feelings, and emotions that does not serve you anymore. If you're a manager working in a company, and if you're aspiring to become a senior manager or a general manager, what it takes for you to launch this mission of being a senior manager or a general manager from manager is the process of shedding the payload of shedding the identity of manager, because if you are clinged on to the identity of being the manager, it's very difficult for you to shed that and then become the senior manager or the general manager that you want to become. Because you are anchored here, you are attached to this, you are addicted to being manager. The behaviors that you do as manager needs to change when you become a senior manager. So behaviors need to be shed. The emotions or feelings that you were going through as a manager is definitely going to be different when you become a senior manager. So that has to be shed. Habits that you are having or nurturing as a manager also needs to change when you become senior manager. As famously Marshall Goldsmith's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. That also means if you want to be there, you need to shed a lot of things, because unless you feel lighter, unless you shed the payload, you can't launch the satellite in the orbit. The lighter you are, the higher you go. Shed for good.